Welcome to Finding Avalon, the podcast that amplifies disabled voices. I'm your host, Jenna, a disability inclusion advocate, communicator, and storyteller. This is a place where disabled folks correct the narrative by sharing authentic lived experiences. Join me as we explore life with disability through our lens, because representation matters. Welcome back to Finding Avalon. When you listen and engage with this podcast, whether you live with disability or you're an ally wanting to better support us, you're actively advancing inclusion, one story at a time. On this episode, we have Kathryn Dunmore joining us from Burlington, Ontario. Kathryn is a skilled writer and editor with decades' experience writing compelling stories for newspapers, magazines, and blogs. An adept communicator focused on building awareness for nonprofit organizations, she's worked with the Canadian Red Cross, ALS Canada, and Halton Industry Education Council, focusing on nonprofit awareness building. Kathryn's work had been her priority for over 20 years until an unthinkable experience altered her family forever with the loss of her beloved sister. She unexpectedly found herself in the role of dedicated auntie mom, adopting her treasured nephew. Kathryn's new focus is bringing awareness, humanity, and prevention to the forefront of the opioid crisis and homelessness epidemic, an intertwined state of emergency impacting countless Canadians, their families, and their communities. Welcome, Kathryn. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Opioid poisoning has rapidly become a critical health concern here in Canada and around the world. It's something that can happen at any time and to anyone in our lives, with often tragic consequences. Between January 2016 and September 2024, the Public Health Agency of Canada reported a total of 50,928 apparent opioid toxicity deaths, the vast majority being accidental. There is so much stigma attached to the image of opioid use, but it's important to note that these are often medications that are prescribed by a doctor, given to patients to help relieve pain during recovery from an injury or when treating chronic illness, and it's also used during surgeries when a person is under anesthesia. Even when closely monitored by a physician, opioids can be given safely, but there is a high risk that this medication can very easily form a long-term substance addiction. Not only has this risk increased related to prescription opioids, but at the same time, an illegal non-prescription opioid supply containing substances stronger than heroin has been causing widespread harm across Canada. The opioid crisis has become a public health emergency, devastating families and communities across the country. Kathryn's family has experienced this pain and loss in a deeply personal way. Kathryn, I want to thank you for your willingness to talk with us about this painful but important issue. And before you do, at any point, please know that we can pause or stop altogether. And the same goes for our listeners. When we talk about difficult topics and trauma, if you need to, please pause and step away anytime. Your well-being comes first. Kathryn, can you tell us how opioids and opioid poisoning impacted your life and your family's life? And again, please take your time and share only what you feel comfortable to share.
Well, it's interesting because it's something that we don't talk about as a family. My mom and dad are full on in the stigma, and I can see how that brushes off on me. But it's so important to talk about it and to be honest about it. My sister, her name is Samantha. She wanted me to be open about it. She wrote in her will that she wanted me to talk to Aiden about her addiction when he was 11 years old. And he's 11 years old now. So it's like, now's the time. My sister's addiction went back several years. She had an operation on her wrist. She had very small wrists. So she was getting carpal tunnel a lot. My mom had the same operation because they have just little delicate wrists. And after that operation, she was prescribed opioids. Oh, this would have been 20 years ago. Wasn't a thing, right? 25 even. So she herself found she had a problem, and she came to me and she said, I can't go one day without one of these pills, so it's a problem. So she decided she was going to go to a methadone clinic, and that's what she did. It was at that time she found out she was pregnant with my nephew, Aiden. And I think that him coming along gave her that extra determination to be healthy, because she did become very healthy. She took care of her body. She was drinking all like smoothies with all these nutrients in it. Like, she just became very healthy. And she stayed that way for a number of years. And then when she did give birth to Aiden, there was a lot of complications. And that also came from stigma, because she had that previous opioid addiction. Her birth was so complicated. Aiden was 3 months early. They were trying to keep her on bed rest in the hospital so he wouldn't come that early. But she was in so much pain, they wouldn't give her any medication other than aspirin. And it took a social worker, an advocate, coming to the hospital and saying, give her meds. Give her medications that you would give anybody else. This is a painful experience. She needs to be medicated for it. So they did. That's when they were like, okay, fine. Even though my sister was begging for days. She was in the hospital for 5 days total. So it took someone else speaking on her behalf before they listened. So that was my first, I guess, experience with stigma in that regards. So after she gave birth, there were so many complications that she did need surgery, and the process of even getting that surgery. So it took a year to see a surgeon, took another year to get the operation. So we're talking about 2 years, wherein it just got worse. Like, it was just getting so much physically worse for her. So we moved in together, got a little townhouse in Burlington. Aiden would have been about 3 years old, so just a tiny little guy. And at that point, she was having a lot of difficulty physically. She could barely pick him up. So that's basically the reasoning why I moved in with her, to help her with him. So fast forward to the operation. Of course, when they're in there, they discover all this other stuff has to be fixed too. Like, there were steel rods, there were things removed. Like, it was just more than they expected. So she knew that she would be prescribed some heavy duty drugs after back surgery. So she asked me to kind of be the gatekeeper for the drugs. And I did my best, but it was overwhelming for her. I would hide them up high somewhere where, someone who had back surgery is not going to be able to reach. She reached them. It's that addiction drove her to reach them. And that's putting her in a lot of pain just to do that. And that was the first time I saw her overdose. So after that, it was a pretty fast spiral downward. I didn't know what I was looking at the time. I certainly went about things completely wrong. I would do it entirely different if I knew then what I know now. But all I can do is learn from it and just talk about it so people can maybe try to have the empathy when the time is needed, when the person's still with you. Because I certainly didn't. I was just trying to prove that she had this problem so much that I wasn't really empathizing with her.
And it's, Kathryn, it's really impossible to expect yourself to know how to handle that. You didn't know what you were dealing with. You've never been through it before. And we are not taught about this. It's not talked
Hmm.
about. So, like, what you're doing right now is preventative education for other people. So that's super important. I want you to give yourself credit for that, because I know how I can hear the pain in your voice when you're describing this.
Thank you for saying that. No, it took me a long time to realize that, and keep in mind that when I was going through this with her, we're talking almost a decade ago. So think about how far we've come in a decade in education,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, now the Red Cross has training on what to do with an opioid poisoning. And I look at that and I say, wow, so my sister was going through all these overdoses and I'm just thinking she's having a really good nap. You know what I mean? Like, it's just stuff that would have helped me. But yeah, I certainly didn't have the knowledge back then. And I have to say, I went the tough love route, which is not the way to go with addiction. I'll be the first to say that now. But yeah, it was a very, very vicious spiral downward. It was quick, but it was vicious. She attempted to take her life 3 times because of this addiction. She knew that she had a problem and she was having the worst time dealing with it, and she was hospitalized 3 times, put in the mental, health ward, and we would go visit her there a lot in that year. Again, I didn't know I was looking at what I was looking at.
Mhm.
So I was like, is this must be normal, falling asleep all the time must be normal with all these drugs she's on, because they had her on so many drugs to deal with basically her mental health at this point. One thing I do want to say is that when you know someone has chronic pain or disability, and she would tell me that, I would hear her, but I wasn't really hearing her. I wasn't hearing what that was meaning to her, how that was affecting her life. I didn't know. How could I know? I didn't know what chronic pain was.
Mhm. Or how it feels.
Or how it feels,
Yeah.
right? So as much as she could, there was a lot of frustration in me that, well, you're a mother, you've still got to deal, like, suck it up, buttercup kind of attitude, which is the wrong way to go about it now. Now, after all this education, I know I could see what I did wrong and I could see what I would do again better if I could. I will always have that regret. And that's just something you live with. There's nothing that will get that gone from me. And it's so much worse when you must feel alone in it because your own sister is saying, "Let's pick up our socks here and get going. We've got a little boy to raise." Mhm.
Yeah. And you were trying to do what you could with what you had in the situation you were in. I can totally hear that.
Mhm. But it was a vicious, vicious spiral in that her mental health took a huge hit. Finally she got her physical health dealt with, somewhat. I mean, the back surgery didn't cure all of the pain. Obviously, there's always going to be a bit of pain, but it helped, and that was, I guess, the best she was gonna get basically at that point. She was a trooper. She was much more of a trooper than I can tell you that much. But, it did get to her. It definitely got to her. So she was dealing with a lot, mentally. There would be the attempts on her life, deliberate in terms of, she's telling her doctors this is how she's feeling, and then they are physically sending the police. 3 times we had the police come to our house to take her forcefully, because 'cause she'd go kicking and screaming, forcefully to the hospital where she'd be kept there. Just taking her, and, apparently this was the best thing for her. I would go and visit her in those places, and it was the most sad, depressing places. Gray walls, old, battered furniture. Like, how can anybody expect to me, it's just not the place, not conducive to somebody's improving someone's mental health. It was the saddest place.
Mhm.
But that's where they kept her, and there was the last time they basically said, "You're not going to be able to live with your son. You're just not stable enough." The addiction at that time was very bad. She was what they call on the nod a lot, and he was picking up on that. He didn't like it. So my sister with her addiction, there are certain days she'd go to Hamilton, she'd get her weekly methadone supply, but she would see her old friends there. She would not just get her own methadone supply. So those days, she would come home and she'd be heavily on the nod. And Aiden hated seeing that. It really bothered him seeing her like that. It came to the point where she was falling asleep on the couch. He would come up and just hit her, just to get her, I guess, awake. It was very difficult to see, so they ended up removing her from the home. Well, the first place she ended up was a place that helps people in addiction, it helps with their mental health, and she was improving there. But there's only fixed time that you can stay at these places, so she was booted out of there and into, like, a YWCA. The YWCA in Hamilton is where people know to go to get drugs. It's heavily populated with addicts, addiction, with the drugs that they're looking for, and they're not good quality drugs, right? So this is what she was doing in this period that she was staying at the YWCA, waiting to get into a rehab. And it was April 20th. She had some drinks, and then she took something that had fentanyl in it, and she died that day. So she didn't get into her rehab. She didn't get her chance to. Um, and she died at a home, which I regret. And a lot of people say to me, "Well, you wouldn't want to come across her." Yeah, I would have been okay with coming across her if she was at home in bed.
Yeah.
But yeah, since then it will be 5 years. This April 20th. I was just talking to my younger sister about it, and we said, as if it doesn't feel that long. I could hear her laugh so clearly. I can hear the words she'd say to me so clearly, and yet it's been 5 years. In that 5 years, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about addiction. I've learned a lot about opioid poisoning. When I was researching, I'm like, "Oh, that's what I should have done. Oh, that's what you're supposed to do. I didn't know that, and oh my god, did I ever mess that up." It's scary how prevalent it is. They're saying now it's 20 Canadians a day are dying of opioid poisoning. Um, I myself know of people who have relatives who've died of it, and that's just
Mhm.
6 degrees, if you will.
That's right. And what I think what struck me so hard in understanding it was how it could be someone's first time trying it, and that so many of these deaths are accidental, and that
Oh, yeah.
is absolutely devastating.
It's that her death was absolutely accidental. She would not have wanted to die. I was in counseling at that point, and I was telling my counselor how my sister calls for her son to talk to her son. And luckily, she did call for him the day she died because I got that time to talk to her, and it was video call. So I got to see her, and she was all made up. She had makeup on. She looked pretty good, right? So it was a nice phone call to have, and the last thing I ever said to her was, "I love you," and I have that. So, I'm glad she called in, but my counselor would say it was very rare to call in as much as she did. Now, there were periods where we didn't hear from her and, because she was doing her thing or, she would still have her overdoses. I'd hear about it. It was really rough to watch her, um go down. It really
Mhm.
was. One of my best friends had said to me, "It must be like watching her die." And this was before she passed. And I
Mhm.
thought, "Oh, I hope not." But it was exactly that. I was watching her die each overdose she had, right? You're increasing your risk. You're not going to come through it. And that's how I ended up informing that one friend. I said, "My sister overdosed again, but this one, she didn't make it through." It's a true story, right? Like that's what happens with them. I wasn't told by my counselor until after she died that addiction is a fatal disease.
Yeah, and that is worth us pausing on because people don't realize that addiction is a disability. It's an illness, it's a disease, right?
Mhm,
And people who are having substance use issues or addictions are human beings. They do need help. They do deserve compassion. They do deserve barrier free treatment.
mhm,
And it's got to be confusing and frustrating and even helpless to witness your sister's decline. And yet at the same time, here you are raising awareness. You are doing your own healing work. For me, hearing it, I have so much respect for what you tried to do regardless of knowing how to do it right, quote unquote, right or not. And also for your sister who
Mhm.
was fighting and it was a losing battle of illness.
Yeah, it is an illness. She fought. I saw her fight it. She fought
Yeah.
very hard against it. It is an incredibly overwhelming illness. It it takes so much more than just that person, it takes a village. When I did a few stories after her death on people living on the streets of Hamilton, and it was being covered in a Facebook page under, Human Beings of Hamilton, and this photographer, he would take these fantastic photos of people living on the streets, and he would talk to them, he would get their stories. With their permissions, he would
Mhm.
share it. People loved it. This page skyrocketed in popularity because people loved it. They loved seeing the stories behind the people and how people who are led to the streets could be for any reason, especially in this time after COVID, things have been a lot harder. And then often what can happen is they turn to the drugs because they need to either stay awake so they don't get robbed, or they need something to put them to sleep so they can sleep when they know it's safest to do so. So it's tricky. It's very, very
Mhm.
complicated,
Mhm.
and very intertwined, substance use and homelessness.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I interviewed this man who runs Wayside House, and it's basically a recovery home for men in Hamilton. And he was the one who explained it as a disease. And he said, you know, my mom, she had breast cancer and she relapsed and she got breast cancer again. He said, we didn't treat her any certain different kind of way just because she got breast cancer again. But we do that with people who are struggling with substance abuse. Oh, you relapsed again. Well, if you study it, people usually relapse 8 or 9 times before they can finally get sober, but
Yeah.
it can be quite a process. So why do we use shame when it's, "Oh, you've relapsed. Oh."
Yeah, condemning and shaming
Mhm.
when that person is fighting for their life.
Right, right, and they did not wanna relapse. It takes more than just the one person to help with recovery, and I spoke to somebody who made it through that program, and he said, "The thing that keeps me sober is the fact that I know I can go back." So that recovery house is not only just like a rehab, gets them sober and puts them out again. It gets them sober, but then it always keeps a bed for them should they ever need it.
Like a
If they
safety
re
net.
if they relapse, if they think they're gonna relapse, they will send the taxi out to go and get you, bring you back so you have a bed, and he said that ongoing continuum of care is what keeps him in recovery because people
Mhm.
care. Nobody spoke his name for years, but people talking to him, making him feel like human, those acts of kindness, he said, is what eventually made him want to get sober.
Yeah. And again, it's all about dismantling the dehumanization of people who are disabled, chronically ill, mentally ill, in active addiction, on the street and homeless, at all kinds of risks.
Mhm.
And people just pass by and judge immediately when, as you say, that was your sister and it started with a simple wrist surgery,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah, back then they didn't I don't know if they knew about the risks of addiction, but they certainly didn't educate the patients on, the hazards of it.
Mm-hmm.
They just gave them out and, of course, like, we know they are needed. Someone has back surgery, they are needed. But
Yeah.
let's give them the education, like, you have a
Yeah.
high potentiality of being addicted to this drug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is part of informed consent.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
I go through high levels of chronic pain for years and years and years. I can't remember what it's like not to be in pain. And that's the first question that I ask now that I know about your sister's story and other people that I have learned from. I ask right away, is this habit forming? What
Mhm.
are the outcomes for this? Because I need to know instead
Mhm.
of just taking what you're telling me will make the pain go away. Is
Mhm.
this drug going to cause suicidal ideation? Because a lot of them do.
Mhm.
Is this drug going to cause me to have an addiction? Because it can happen and it can happen very fast.
Very easily, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I find myself choosing to stay in pain that is so strong that I can't focus sometimes. I can't even think minute to minute. And that's not a solution either. But
Mhm.
if only I think there was more explaining and
Mhm.
informed consent around what these medications can do, what the options might be, what the risks are.
What does it
We
how
need to
could this
know.
affect me? Exactly. So my sister trusted doctors blindly, like, she would take whatever they prescribed her. I remember when they were trying to address her mental health, there are so many drugs they're throwing at her that I said to her, I'm like, "Do you even know what this does?" She said, "Well, no, because the doctor prescribed it." Well, since
Yeah,
then, I'm the same as you now. I research, well, what was it gonna do to me? What you know what I mean? Like, making that education for yourself because 'cause they're not gonna do it for you.
no.
And they don't, so it is up to you.
Yeah. And when you do research the side effects, it's quite an eye opener. I know myself after my car accident when I was prescribed pain medications, what it did to me. I ended up just going cold turkey in the end because it
Mhm,
was too terrifying, the side
mhm,
effects that were happening. And if you're injured or you're hurt or you're going through constant pain, like your sister was, that is going to take a very heavy uh, toll on your mental health. And then if you're taking something else for that, and then that side effect coincides with something else or counteracts with something else, you don't know what you're getting into with this kind of mixture of
mhm,
drugs.
mhm. Yeah, and her doctor was prescribing her oh my gosh, she was on medication, because she sweat too much. She was on medication for her mental health. She was on medication for her back. Like, there's so many medications, and I actually went ended up going in with her once to basically confront her doctor to be like, "What is going on? Why all these medications? Like, why do you keep piling them on?" To the point where one time when she was sent to the hospital, the psychiatrist is like, "What the heck is this list of meds she's on? Like, this is too much." Like
Yeah. It's not even seeing the big picture, you know?
mhm,
What about the bird's eye view of what's actually happening
mhm,
and what all of those drugs are doing together?
mhm. Yep, that's so true. I found with her, it was a lot of band-aiding instead of looking at that continuing care that is so important.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kat. So, your sister, an adoptive parent to your disabled nephew, and an ally who wants to make people aware of the dangers of opioid poisoning as well as the very serious harms from the national housing crisis, as we just talked about. Could we talk now about the stigma that can cloud people's compassion and willingness to listen and learn when it comes to substance use disorder?
Yeah, I can speak directly to being on both sides. When my sister was alive, I was very much in the stigma. I spoke down to her. I would judge. I would judge a lot. Since her passing, it's a whole 180. And it is because I started writing about the people living on Hamilton and talking with them and hearing their voices and hearing their stories. And these were the people that my sister was, around. Before I was very much, um, don't give change to panhandlers that will just encourage them, that will just keep them going in that lifestyle. And now I'm like, who gives a damn? Give them some money. They could use it on what they need at that time. And that's what I do. Sometimes I will buy food, but I'm certainly more humane to them where I really wasn't before. And it took my sister dying really for me to change, but that's what it took.
And that's how strong stigma is, right? That's how
Mm, mhm,
powerful it is.
Mhm. Well, that's
That
how I was brought up. My dad, I remember he's a banker in downtown Toronto, and I remember going into downtown Toronto with him, and he'd be like, "Oh, don't even look at, the people on the street. Don't even look, if they wanted to, they could get jobs." And that's how I was brought up, and that's
mhm,
what I believed. Oh, if they wanted to, they could get jobs. But then in speaking with them, but do they have the clean clothes? Do they have the phones to make the job interviews? And can they keep those phones to get the call back because they often get robbed? And there are so many different layers to things that we can just make blanket statements about. And we do. We do make blanket statements about.
mhm,
I have. I have definitely been a person to make blanket statements and not look deeper.
mhm. Without and I think almost everyone, we all have our biases. We all have a lack of education or awareness, ignorance in its own way that you often do hear people say, well, if they made better choices, if they cared about themselves or their families, they wouldn't do this. And
Hmm.
all of the judging, but not thinking about that human being and what kind of an obstacle course they went through in their lives to get them to this place in time.
Right.
And so, with your increased exposure to people living on the street and people living in active addiction who knew your sister, that must have really brought it really close to home and helped you get that different lens.
Different lens, yeah. I had to fight through a lot of guilt, though, because of the clouded lens I had before.
Mhm.
So it was bittersweet, but in the end, more sweet than bitter because that empathy and that compassion to me is more important than anything else. And that's why you said in your intro how I was all about working, and I was for decades. I mean, the Toronto rat race, right? Like
Yeah.
that's our priority is getting the career. And all my anxiety was around that. And then this happened, it all just stopped. No, it was no longer a priority whatsoever. I mean, it was still important. I still had to,
Yes.
make money, but it went away and in its place. And I have to say, I'm a lot more at peace now. Like now I understand what life is really about. It's not what I
Mhm.
thought it was.
Mhm. When your sister was unwell, you
Hmm.
were immediately there for her.
Yeah, it became the priority. And then more so after she died, it was, recovering from that because, oh, wow, did that explode our family. That took us out, each and every one of us in our different ways. Because while I have my memories of my last words being, "I love you," at least I have that. Whereas my
Mhm.
other sister, her words were very different.
Right.
And that's something that she lives with. My other sister in England didn't even have that chance to say goodbye or anything to that effect. She couldn't even make it to, I guess, the funeral we had because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and she was in England, which was entirely shut down,
Mhm.
so she couldn't get out of it. So, yeah, everybody had to deal with their own personal demons when it came to her death. I remember my dad writing on her coffin because it was just a wooden coffin. He wrote, "Why did I let this happen?" And it broke our hearts. I remember my mom getting so mad at him, like, "You didn't let this happen." But in his head, he's the dad.
Yeah.
He's supposed to protect, right? And here he was standing at his daughter's coffin. So he took that very personal. He still does to this day. He still like, it's like with me with the guilt. It is what it is.
Yeah, how could you not? How
How
can
could you
you
not?
not?
Right?
Your feelings are valid. This is a
Mhm.
massive loss, a massive
Mhm.
shock.
Well, that's just it. She's never coming back. Like, it's a finality to it that you have to deal with every single day of your life. It's a new reality. It's not great. But the life we were living before when she was living in addiction wasn't great either. That was a lot of trauma in itself. Both of us, me living with it, Aiden seeing it, me trying to protect Aiden. Um, yeah, that's where a lot of my guilt comes from, is trying to protect Aiden and not providing her the help or being even a friend in the end. But it is what it is.
We definitely never know what is coming our way, how to be equipped, and what might end up becoming very painful lessons.
Mm,
But can
mm.
I ask you a little bit more about um, when you decided you would adopt Aiden, and how that felt?
It wasn't a decision. It was just, this is what's gonna happen. We were already living together at the time. So my older sister was in England. She has a life set up there. My other sister was living with her husband, her child in a different city. So it wasn't really a decision. It was just something that it's like, okay, she would have wanted me to. She knew how close we were, and she saw the parenting I was doing in her absence, so she would have wanted me to do it, and it was not a question. It was just what had to be done for him. It's funny how much of a priority a child makes your life, but yeah, no, it just came down to him.
Mm-hmm.
My older sister would have wanted to as well, but because she's in a different country, it just wasn't legally possible. But yeah, any one of us would have done it.
And how old was Aiden at the time?
6. He
He
was
was
6,
6.
yeah. He was
Kindergarten age.
Yeah, he was little. He was little. He knew enough that it was not good, so when I told him that she had passed, he just put his little fingers in his ears and he said, "I don't wanna hear this." And that's basically how he's dealt with her grief for a number of years, and then I started getting him into grief therapy and his own counseling and, things to help him process it. Because I was dealing with my own grief for years after.
Mm-hmm.
Years after. Like, there was a couple years after where I couldn't even look at her photo. I couldn't see her smile. You know what I mean? Like, it was just too painful. Couldn't do it. So with him, I needed to reach for that outside help to help me with that, and, so yeah, he's been in children's grief therapy for a couple years now, and, in his individual counseling for just about a year now, but, I mean, he's 11 now, so now he's able to articulate a bit more about how he's feeling,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So it's better age, but it's very interesting that my sister said in her will that she said, "At 11 years old, I want you to teach Aiden about addiction." And now here he is 11. I'm like, "Okay."
And have you started?
No, no, I haven't. He's a very young 11. He's got learning disabilities due to his prematurity. He was in the end born 3 months early, so he was
Yes.
in NICU for a number of months, and then you wouldn't know it now by looking at him. He's tall. He's like, you know, you wouldn't know it. But yeah, no, he's got a lot going on with himself, so there's
Mm-hmm.
always something to work on. Yeah, I've learned a lot about disabilities. I was almost gonna say living with disabilities, but I'm not the one living with it. I'm living with someone living with disabilities. I saw my sister managing her disabilities, and now I see Aiden managing his. And I will continue to help with my new lens I have acquired through my education.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important to me to be able to do that for him.
Yeah. You've had a very up close and personal view
Mhm.
of different kinds of disability.
All different kinds, yeah.
Yeah, that's not visible most of the time to other people. And that makes you better equipped as an ally and a supporter.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
During an opioid poisoning, a bystander could be the person who makes the difference between permanent brain damage, life, or death. There are medications available that can temporarily reverse poisoning and save a life while waiting for emergency responders to arrive. I wanted to ask you, what can bystanders do to help a person who is in distress during a possible opioid poisoning?
Well, first, look at the person as a human. Think of them as in medical crisis. You need to help. You won't get in trouble for helping. There are naloxone kits available in pretty much every pharmacy. I know I got mine from Shoppers. You can keep them on you. They've made it so easy now that it's just an up the nose kind of squirt of nasal spray. And you can literally save someone's life. If they're going into an overdose, an opioid poisoning, you have the ability to stop that with this kit, this free kit. I can't stress that enough, that they're available. And I think that should speak to the epidemic that's going on, that the government has made these kits available. So let's take them up on that offer. And that way you have the power. You have literally the power to save someone's life. And it can be easy as that. Another thing I would say to those that are using, if someone you are with does have a poisoning, that you need to stay with them. This happened to my sister a few times where they would leave her, and that would mean that the paramedics didn't know what they were treating as fast as they could have if her friends stayed with her and told them. It doesn't matter if you're using, they're not there for that. They just want to know as much information as possible. It's more important that you stay and help the person than leaving the scene in fear. So whether you see it, whether you're with it when you see it, just take some sort of action. And that can make the difference between somebody's life and somebody's family losing their sister or their brother or their son or their daughter or their mother or their father. And it is them. That is who they are. They are somebody's loved one. They're somebody. So they're worth
Mhm.
it.
Absolutely. And Kat, when we think about educational resources, could you talk a little bit more about first aid courses
Mhm.
for opioid poisoning intervention or response?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit earlier with the Canadian Red Cross now including opioid poisoning in their first aid training. Um, I think is so significant. It removes a bit of the fear around what do I do, the fear around dealing with it, the fear around what to expect. And again, it just speaks to how much of a problem this is. If the Canadian Red Cross is putting this in part of their first aid training, then you need to be trained in it. And it's out there. There's so
Mhm.
many different resources, not just to learn about what to do should you see someone in poisoning. It's what to do should you see someone having a substance use disorder. There are many people out there now who are realizing, like myself, that you need to talk about it. And that's the way that people are going to start understanding. And we start building that empathy by talking about it.
Absolutely. What is a common misconception about disability in your experience, and how can we work to change that narrative?
I think a common misperception is that they can fix themselves and they should be doing it. The onus is on them to fix themselves. And it's not that easy. Uh, People need to realize that this is a bigger issue than just an individual issue. It's a societal issue. It's something that can be supported into recovery. Absolutely can be. We've seen other countries have great success rates with addiction and living with it, just by putting in the resources that they need to survive and to make a life for them that they could be proud of. It's entirely possible. Do we have all the resources now in Canada? Not enough of them. Certainly not enough of them. But it's just understanding where they're coming from as well, having that empathy, being able to look at them humanely and think, that could be my sister, that could be my brother.
Hmm. Seeing the human being behind the struggle.
Every time, each and
Mhm.
every person.
Yeah. Catherine, I wanted to ask you a lighter question. I have a Finding Avalon podcast playlist, and what I do is I ask my guests if they have a song or two that really speaks to them about their experience with disability or anything that fits the theme about what we've talked about today. And maybe we can talk about why they resonate with you.
Yeah, for me, it's Human by Rag and Bone Man because when it first came out, my sister and I remember being in the car and we would just sing to that song. And it's about someone dealing with substance use disorder. We loved it. We would sing it together. And now, whenever I hear it, I think of her every single time.
Thank you. Do you have another?
Another one would be "Son of a Bitch." Uh,
Don't worry, you can say what you want on this
yeah.
podcast. You don't need to hold back.
Also known as SOB.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that song is also, I believe, about living with substance use disorders. So that one also has another one that kind of rings close to home. I believe the lyrics is "Son of a bitch, I can't get clean." Substance use disorder. It's a battle. And certainly, if you're battling it alone, it's going to be pretty much insurmountable. So that song is very, very resonating with us. It's by Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats, I believe. But yeah, that's another good song we used to jam to.
I'm gonna add both of these to the playlist, and yeah, the lyrics of these songs are very powerful, and no wonder they resonate with you. So thank you for sharing that with me.
You're very welcome.
And now we're at our last question, and it is this. In 3 words, whether that's 3 individual words or a simple phrase with 3 words, what does disability inclusion mean to you and why?
I'll say live with empathy. I think it's the utmost important to have when we're living in a society with other people. And it's something that we're all capable of. And I think we should all strive for. While we're all striving to win the biggest paycheck or biggest house, I say let's strive to have the biggest amount of empathy. Live with that.
Mhm.
And I think it would be a much more wonderful world if people had more empathy.
Mhm. Yeah, that all comes back to looking at the humanity of people and having compassion and empathy for what they may be going through, even if you don't quite understand it. Because let's face it, we're not all islands. That is, I think, completely against what community really
Hmm.
is and what humanity really means.
I just feel that's the way it's gone, that people have lost a lot of empathy in this race called life. So yeah, very important.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for spending time with us today and talking so openly about this important issue. Is there anything else we didn't talk about that you wanted to add or any thoughts you wanted to share?
There's so many things, but not everything can be covered in a podcast or even one story. Everybody has a story, but everybody has a very complex story. There's a lot of complexities that we don't see or we don't understand because we live our own lives. But I just wanted to say thank you for doing this podcast because you're giving voices where voices due. So thank you very much for doing this. And certainly thank you for having me on to talk about this very important subject.
You are so welcome. I feel very honored to have you here talking with me about this. There are so many people living with chronic pain and chronic illness, or people who may need to have a surgery and are commonly prescribed these opioid drugs. And this episode is one that I really hope will reach so many people to raise awareness and improve that empathy you were just talking about.
Mm, that'd be nice.
Definitely would. I think what really stands out to me is that opioid poisoning and substance use disorders are not something that just happens in a far off place to other people. And every single person's life is valuable and deserving of support to recover. Like if that happens to them, to know that they have community support,
Hmm.
healthcare support, family support. It's everything you've been saying. And as I said earlier, I'm going to link some resources so that other people can learn more and click away and learn what first aid actions that they can take as bystanders if they ever encounter a possible opioid poisoning. And also just to read up more about removing stigma and ways of being more empathetic and more informed, right? Because we can't do better until we know better.
Hmm. Hmm. Very
Mhm.
true. Very true.
Mhm. Well, thank you once again, Catherine, for what you're doing as an ally, your parenting of your nephew, and the work that you're doing in your sister's memory.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for listening along to Finding Avalon. You can find this indie disabled storytelling project anywhere you get your podcasts. Please take a moment to follow, rate, and share this episode with others. It's a small but helpful act of allyship. Find out who my next featured guest will be over at Avalon Advocacy on Instagram, where I'll post a sneak preview the week before the next episode drops. Special artist thanks and credit for the unreleased feature song Coal Miner, written by Steve Hoskins, arranged by Naomi Kavka, and performed by Naomi Kavka, Bryn Porter, and Tony Kostelik. See you next time, everyone.